Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Fridays with Fred. I am Fred Faulkner. Thanks for joining me today. I am broadcasting out to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Today's conversations are going to revolve around the news around Patagonia and their purpose of helping save the environment and how they're making good on that. We're going to talk a little about return to office and this idea of quiet quitting and what's really going on there. And as a third item, because that news dropped just yesterday, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Figma acquisition, Adobe acquiring Figma, which has been one of their biggest competitors in the customer experience space for designers and customer experience professionals. So thanks for joining. We'll see how long this takes. If you want to come in and join the conversation, I meant to do this last week, did not do this. You can go to according to Fred /FWF for Fridays with Fred. Go ahead and join in through StreamYard. I'll pull you in. We'll actually make this maybe a little more interactive conversation than me just talking for the next 20 to 30 to 40 minutes. Because my point of view is a point of view, but your point of view is also your point of view. And let's have a point of view together. So happy Friday. And let's get started. So big news that came out this week was Patagonia. Patagonia, known for a lot of things, great outdoor gear, great clothing, but also known and probably one of the biggest quintessential purpose-driven companies. They are cited time and time again for having a purpose that they want to live up to, which is helping save the environment. They made a lot of news a few years ago by saying they're going to take all their Black Friday sales and donate that to conservation efforts. And it is a private company. It is not one that is owned by any of the other big conglomerates. So they can really much do whatever they wanted to. When we think about things like purpose, and a lot of companies living up to or citing a purpose as a lot of reasons for why they exist, purpose has been cited as one of those kind of big growth drivers, and how companies live up to that purpose has, gone through a lot of criticism, myself being one of them. I think criticism of what purpose really means is one thing, and how you actually make action and make good on that purpose is another. So for a personal perspective, when I think about purpose, I think every company should have a purpose on why they exist. Does it have to be altruistic? No. Do I always maybe personally feel that purpose sometimes gets put into an altruistic level? Yeah, I think, unless it's really clear on what the reason why you exist, purpose sometimes is always, for me personally, bleeds into altruism. So when I think of Patagonia and they want to help create outdoor ways to continue to enjoy the outdoor world, because that is what the company that they products they produce, they are doing what they can to live up to that. But here's my thing about purpose and things about why companies exist. You can have a reason, you can have a purpose, but at the end of the day, if you don't make money, you can't fulfill some of that purpose. And I think Patagonia is taking that idea of that, yes, we create clothing, we create gear, and we're doing things, but we're actually putting our money where our mouth is. So Patagonia is part of a class, a corporation, a B corporation, which is really also focused on making sure that your shareholders are not just those that are on Wall Street, not just those that are your investors. They are your employees. They are your public shareholders, but they're also a lot of other aspects. And in order to be a B corporation, you have to go through a lot of other requirements to be part of that. So they are a B corporation. They are supporting the environment and then, donating money back in. Little things that people know is that you might be a big fan of Patagonia. It might be part of your identity. One of those things that we like to think of when you associate with a purpose. Tom Shoes is another one of those companies where I will donate a shoe for every shoe that gets bought. So you have some personal affiliation, some personal connection as to why you might buy Tom Shoes, because there's a purpose behind why they exist. Patagonia being, again, one of those, a purpose of why I buy Patagonia is because I know that my money is going to go to help conservation efforts and save the environment. And yes, could I return my Patagonia jacket that's got a zipper that's broken to get a zipper fixed? I can. How many people actually do that? I don't know. You might just go off and buy another Patagonia jacket because that money is going to then go towards, again, saving the environment and doing some more conservation efforts. So the news that came out this week with Patagonia was, at the end of the day, is that they their owner said, you know what? This isn't working anymore. What we're doing right now is not fulfilling the cause, is not doing what needs to be done. And so $10 million on a Black Friday isn't cutting it anymore. And so the news that came out is that they decided to go ahead and sell the company. the owners decided to go and do something different. And so they created two new subsidiaries or two new companies that they decided to put all the shares into. And while one company owns 98% of the actual shares, they're non-voting shares. So there's still a business that needs to be run, but they're saying now the profits from the business are going to do something more and do something bigger to helping our purpose and our cause. And that is powerful. That is saying we are no longer looking at just what we can do to make money. The money has to be there. They're estimating approximately, depending on the health of the business, $100 million annually being put back into conservation efforts, which is fantastic. But they need to do something different. And one of the things that I loved about reading this note from their owner was that, truth be told, there were no good options available, so we created our own. One option was to sell Patagonia and donate all the money, but we couldn't be sure a new owner would maintain our vision to keep our team of our people around the world employed. Another path was to take the company public. What a disaster that would have been. Holy cow, front and center. That's what they're saying. What a disaster, because they know even though public companies with good intentions are under too much pressure to create short-term gain at the expense of long-term viability and responsibility. This statement in and of itself speaks volumes to what's going on in today's day and age when it comes to public companies. The pressure to do quarterly earnings, what Wall Street wants to see, the short game versus the long game. This wasn't going to work for them. And that, I think, is a very interesting statement on what it means to be driving towards your purpose and saying it isn't just about the money. It isn't just about how we make the money. It is about really making sure that it was going to make it happen. So they had to create their own. So here's how this works, right? I'm just going to read this straight up. 100% of the company's voting stock transfers to the Patagonia Purpose Trust, created to protect the company's values. Awesome, right? So now you have an entity that is now going to focus on protecting company values, making sure the business still runs. And then 100% of the non-voting stock has been given to the Holdfast Collection, a nonprofit dedicated to fighting environmental crisis and defending nature. Two distinct organizations with two distinct purposes joined together by the purpose of what Patagonia is trying to accomplish. I think this is putting a lot of companies on watch. I think it's actually putting your money where your mouth is and doing something bigger and beyond what, what you can do with just maybe an annual Black Friday sale or other efforts. I have to say there's a lot of companies that are looking at this and maybe rethinking about what their purpose is and how they're addressing purpose. If they're not, they should. But let's also face it, not every company's purpose is to go save the world. But this one, who's been on the pillar of purpose and what purpose means and how purpose is delivered, has made a statement to the world and saying, guess what? The world is our shareholder now. The earth is our shareholder now. It is not money. It is not driven by other means. And that is something that I think a lot of corporations need to be looking at when it comes to what they do and why they're hanging out and doing it. So what other companies are out there? Any other B Corp, I think, is going to be looking at this. I think just everyone in general, if you're in the top Fortune 100 and you have a purpose out there, is it there because companies or because consumers like to think that there's a bigger purpose of why you exist and why they might want to buy your brand? Is it, does it really matter at the end of the day? But purpose does play a role. I think a lot of marketers have given a lot of bump up in how it helps them position their brand in the marketplace. That's not to be a diss on the fact that if you are a purpose-driven organization and you are creating products and services that are doing bigger, better things with the output of that, fantastic. This hopefully is now putting another gold stamp on why you exist and what you're doing, and you have another reason to look up to what Patagonia is doing. But I do think there's also a lot of organizations out there that have a quote purpose. They're using it in their marketing and PR teams are using that purpose as a way to drive revenue that maybe isn't always going to go to what the purpose really is at the end of the day. I think it's something we need to be paying attention to Good on Patagonia. That's what I'm going to say. Good on Patagonia for actually walking the walk and not just talking the talk. Good. Congratulations. I love it. And I specifically love the fact that you've given kind of Wall Street the middle finger and said, nope, going public isn't it, because going public does not serve our best interest. So put it into place, keep it private. The end game is not always selling out. The end game for Patagonia is to save the world and make Earth here as long as possible. So congratulations to the whole entire Patagonia team. Yvonne, man, good on you for taking this to the next level and saying there's something bigger here, and our purpose is going to actually deliver on it. So that's what are your thoughts on Patagonia? Is it all talk? Are you enjoying what you're seeing and hearing about what they're doing? Is it going to change, or is it just going to be, is it really going to affect larger change in the world, and especially with organizations that have bigger purpose? Or is it going to be one of those things that is great for Patagonia? You do you, man. We're going to do us. I think there's going to be a little bit of a swell. I think other companies are going to follow suit. But there's a lot of other companies that aren't, because at the end of the day, their shareholders, which are the people that are investing in them, are going to have a lot of other say, and that is fill my pocketbooks, deliver my revenue, make me money. I'll deliver that philanthropy how I want to deliver it. It's not going to be necessarily through company initiatives. So that is the Patagonia news. Super excited to see what they're doing there. And what's going to happen with them moving forward. Next topic I wanted to jump into revolves around return to office. This is something that now we are 2.5 years into the pandemic. We've got boosters, we've got vaccines, we got boosters, we got more boosters coming on the way. People are thinking about returning back to the office, and maybe more importantly, bosses are thinking about returning back to the office. What does that mean for the average worker when they've had this world of adjusting? And also this term of quiet quitting, and how that's become much more of a popular term, because people are, inevitably getting frustrated and that they can't have some of that work-life balance that has come into play. So I have a perspective that I wanted to kind of share. Again, if you want to join in the conversation, go ahead and use that URL with the FWF at the end of the URL. Join in. I'll bring you into the chat. We can talk live in person, have a discussion. But return to office. When COVID hit and we jumped into everyone got sent home, and then when we realized this was going to be longer than 2 weeks, it had a tremendous effect on everything, right? So anyone who required and relied on having to be in an office had to have some really hard decisions on how we're going to bring you into the office, make you safe, make it safe for you to be here and still do your job, because you have to be on the line. You have to be in a space that has to physically be there. And then there's a lot of other parts where the organizations and companies of the world realize that they can reduce their ability to have to be there. So I know a neighbor of mine who works in financial services, their call center, they realize they can put all their call center devices at home with their employees, still be able to monitor what needs to be monitoring because they're in financial services and there's regulations, but they were able to deploy their teams to their homes so they can be safe, still protect their jobs, still do work, and still be safe at the same time. But that is, something that has now gone evolved. People have started to realize, I've saved on my commute time. Now I find myself, I'm actually working more because I don't have that commute anymore. And there's a lot of work-life balance things that came into play. And this challenge of how do I put work in my same space as where I live. And while it's not it was not a new concept of working from home, I think for the vast majority of us out there, where we weren't in a remote first world, where we didn't work for a company that was already distributed in remote first, and have the discipline of understanding how to do work from home and still do my job and still have a work-life balance, we've gone through a huge amount of change over the last 2 years getting adjusted to that. I know I really enjoyed working at the office because I really enjoyed having those impromptu conversations with my colleagues, being able to go out to lunch, being able to go on a quick walk at lunchtime and have conversations and build part of my social infrastructure was my work infrastructure. And that is not the same as jumping on a Zoom meeting or a Slack, messaging or Teams calls it's just not the same, right? There's a human interaction that does not happen when you're not physically in the office. We had to all go remote because of COVID. Now that we've had this ability to start to come back, and you know, there's a lot of benefits of being remote, right? Companies have been able to take advantage of talent being anywhere and not having to be in a specific region anymore. I think people gravitated to big cities like New York and Chicago and LA and other towns because in cities and in metro areas, because that's where jobs were, because you had to be in office and you had the talent pool. Now you have the ability to have talent from anywhere. So what's the purpose of having a need to go back to office? I think there's a couple things that are driving this return to office conversation, and I think there's a couple, aspects that are driving the quiet quitting part. Let's talk about return to office first. Why do companies want their employees back physically in the office? I think there's two reasons. Some of these are probably cited in if I did enough reading, some of them maybe aren't. I think companies are sitting on a huge amount of real estate that they have to justify why they still own. They have leases they can't get out of. They are building things that they were already midstream when COVID happened that they have to finish and fulfill. There is a pressure probably from management and the actual financial aspect of owning real estate that is affecting bottom lines of organizations. How do they depreciate it? How does it being utilized? What is the infrastructure they've already put in place? And when are they duplicating infrastructures by supporting remote and then also having a physical place that no one goes to? I think that's actually a big driver of what's driving remote return to office, which is someone saying at the end of the day, I have physical money sitting locked up in a physical place, real money locked up in a physical place. You have to start utilizing it, or management has to realize that this is a loss to their bottom line. I think the second part is, and I said this to Scott Monty was on Twitter the other day, and he made a tweet about kind of return to office, and I responded back, and I think there's another aspect of why return to office is in, that is, management has still not adopted and adapted to how to actually manage people in a remote setting and be okay with this. And I think this comes into two aspects. Several aspects. I think one is, when you think about return to office, it is about compensation. Do I just need to pay someone the same pay rate if they're not in a metro area that demands it? I think there is, career pathing that comes into it. I think from a management perspective, I think that the challenge is we haven't been training managers the way we need to be training managers in the last decade. I think management training and how to understand what your workers are doing, how they're getting their job done, does it really matter that they're doing it at midnight or they're doing it at 5 a.m. or they're doing it in the middle of the day? This is a whole cultural aspect of work that for centuries, we are still on the 9 to 5 in my time zone because that's what manufacturing was, back in the 20s, back when this kind of manufacturing revolution happened. Our ways of working have been set on precedences set decades ago. And that has affected our ability to think about work in a different way. The companies like WordPress, Automatic, who owns WordPress, maybe 37 Signals, who owns Basecamp, and now Hey from an email platform. Anyone who's remote first, who hasn't had to think about physical space and they're hiring talent from anywhere in the world, has to think about how do they make and support a work environment to get the job done. Big corporations, many organizations have struggled with that because there's this desire to put people in chairs to know that work is getting done. That is a management and cultural challenge more than anything else. There is a physical, real estate part of this as well, but that is the big part of what I think is going on here. And that is management challenges of understanding how to manage people in a remote setting. And we're not training our managers to understand how to do that. I think there's also a different dynamic that also comes into play. And that is this idea that you do have a contract, whether it's an actual contract with your employer or not. But there's this employee-employer contract that also exists. I've seen a lot of topics, popping up in social media, like they're monitoring my computer. They know when I'm on and when I'm not on. And I need a piece of software that moves my mouse so they think that I'm active. Um, if you're getting paid to do a job, then yeah, I'm going to expect that you are actually doing the job. And I should, why should you be surprised if a corporation is monitoring a computer to know that it's their physical asset, to know whether you're doing your job or not? We shouldn't be surprised that that exists. We shouldn't be surprised that Microsoft builds in functions to do this. We shouldn't be surprised that Slack builds in functions to do this. Um, but yet people get upset about that. Oh, there's a trust level. Well, yes, there is a little bit of that trust and you have to build that, but that's also a contractual relationship. I'm paying you to do a job and I expect you to do that job because that's what I'm paying you to do. So there's this idea that I have to if I physically see you in the office, I now have a justification to know whether you're doing your job or not. Whether you do or don't doesn't matter. There's that concept that exists, right? So if you're not going to physically be there, I'm going to put software that trusts that you're doing it. Um, but what happens if you do your job really, really well and do it really, really fast? So of an 8-hour day, how much do you really get done when you're physically at the office? I will tell you, you're not doing 8 hours of solid work. You're just not. There's conversations, there's walking between meetings, there's there's lunchtime, there is all these other things that kind of take in. So what's the real work value being done physically in office versus not being in an office? And I think that's one of the big conversations that took place during COVID is you're getting more done because you don't have the commute. You don't have all these distractions. Maybe they're different distractions, but is work still getting done? Managers need to understand that if you can set expectations, communicate clearly, and make sure those expectations are clear and known, where deadlines occur and how you make sure you get your work done, then does it matter if you do it in 6 hours or 8 hours or 12 hours? As long as you're getting it done by those deadlines, that's the aspect. That's how your performance is measured. That is how you are doing your job. So my perspective is that I think the perfect storm of what has happened over the last 2 years, which is we weren't really training managers probably over the last decade very well, especially with people management. Maybe we were promoting people that were just there long enough and kind of felt they were ready for people management, but they weren't really ready for people management. But I think people management is a big part of this in training and making sure that you understand how to train and get the most out of your teams. I think the other aspect is this legacy idea of seeing people physically being there, this idea of what a 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 5 job is because of what we've been trained and ingrained in for the last. And then I think also the idea around you have physical real estate sitting there that's tying up money on a bottom line are real big drivers that are bringing companies back to wanting to bring people back to the office. The reality is that I think the companies that acknowledge the fact that to get your best work, you put your employees in the best situation for them to be successful is the ones that are going to win. And in some cases, that is going to be returning to office. I know when we were, going back to when we, went out into COVID and had to be remote, if you look at a big metro area like Chicago and you're working from home when you're only in a 400, 500, 600 square foot apartment and maybe with somebody else, that is not a conducive work environment to work from home. I know a lot of people that said, I want to get back to the office as fast as possible for a variety of reasons. One is I don't have a lot of space to do work from home. One, two, I'm prefer to be in an office. And three, I need to separate work from home and personal life. Those are important things. And so you will always need a physical office in many ways for organizations. How you put your workers in the best successful environment is going to be something that we all have to adopt and adapt to make it this successful. The companies that figure it out faster, those are the ones that are going to continue to set the pace and outpace everybody else. Now, this idea of quiet quitting, I think also blends into this idea of what is the separation of work and life, right? How do you get your things done during the day? Do it, is the expectation that I'm going to be on after 5 o'clock? Is the expectation that it's going to be, I'm always going to be there at the beck and call? No, we've let ourselves, I think we've let ourselves as an organization, as industries, not as an organization, but as industries in general, right? Whether it be in advertising or manufacturing or any one of these ones in business, is that the companies that work harder and more are the ones that get ahead, but at the cost of burnout. I think the companies that find the balance and trust the balance, have the cultures to support the balance, are the ones that win the long-term game because they're not burning out the employees. If I go on vacation, my email app is coming off my home screen on my phone. My out of office is saying, regardless if I can be connected, my out of office is saying, I'm not checking email. because I need to have that separate. I need to decompress from the space. That's why it's called a vacation. It's not called a vacation if I got to take my work computer with me. It's not called a vacation if I have to always be on. If I can't trust my team to get the stuff done in my absence, then that's a whole different set of challenges. Quiet quitting is happening because we are not giving our employees the space they need to do the separation of church and state. And I still think, again, it is all going to come back to where, excuse me, people are going to want to do this. They're going to want to have this separation. They're going to say, yes, we support it. And then they're going to lose a big deal because the other company worked harder, or they worked the weekend, or they did what they needed to get done. And then it's going to start to go through this like evolution of like, nope, we got to be always on again. The always on mentality is what's killing us at the end of the day. People are finding jobs that are not encouraging always on. And I think that's why we're seeing quiet quitting happening more and more. It's not something new. It's just got a new term for it at the end of the day. So yeah, so that's my take on return to office. Financial reasons, management challenges, and this idea of what has been a construct of what is a work day is what's driving this kind of return to office. Quiet quitting certainly is nothing that I don't think is new. I think it is what we have let our work society become due to a variety of factors. At the end of the day, winning business is what's driving it, and that is causing the burnout for most of those employees that are sitting out there. And that's also why the great resignations happen. People are changing jobs. So they want something that's better for them. And corporations have to understand that and think about it. And that is causing a lot of ruckus in the leadership world of what does it take to run a company effectively and efficiently, at the same time supporting their employees and getting the job done. Okay. Last one that we're going to jump into here is one that caught me by surprise yesterday, but I was also super interested in why this happened. And that is Adobe announced another acquisition. They haven't made one in a while, but they announced the acquisition of a company called Figma. If you're familiar with Figma, Figma is a UX design, co-creation, collaboration tool that lets you do a lot of things. It's not just about web design, which is where I've had the most exposure to it, creating wireframes and comps and other things that have baked into Adobe's ecosystem with Experience Manager and other tools from a user experience and customer journey creation. But Figma does a ton of other things that goes with that as well. And Adobe, has put down a whole whopping $20 billion with a B to acquire it. My guess is that this is going to be something that's going to sunset Adobe XD, which was their biggest competitor in the space. And Adobe bought their biggest competitor to Adobe XD and is now going to make it its focus probably to user experience professionals, creative professionals that want to collaborate and bake it into not only the Creative Cloud, but also the Experience Cloud as well. So huge acquisition. If you're not familiar with Figma, it's been around for about a decade. It has about 30 investors in it. It's gone through several seed rounds. This is a payday. It's a payday for their owners. I mean, these guys, the co-founders, they're billionaires. When this closes, they're going to be billionaires. And I've seen some criticism on some tweets I put out saying this was a sellout. This was not good for the Figma community at the end of the day. Maybe not, but I think at that, also those co-founders and their investors have the right to entertain getting the return on their investment. That's business. That is the way the world works. Some of the greatest companies in the world still end up selling out because at the end of the day, that's what their founders want to do. And that's what their investors are requiring. And that's how it works. I think there are worse places they could have gone. I think being moved into the Adobe world is not a bad place to be. Adobe's ecosystem is phenomenal. They are in every aspect of business, almost every aspect of business. But if you're going to be doing anything in the world of creation, if you're going to be doing anything in the world of marketing and distribution, Adobe is there, right? They have the Creative Cloud from anything from creating designs and wireframes and hugely amount of set of stories and storyboards and just everything in between to the then distribution and publishing of it through Adobe Experience Cloud. They can take you from ideation to publishing to optimization to return on your investment, including commerce. There's again, not many companies can do the entire kind of life cycle of that. There's a lot of companies can do parts of it. I think Adobe is one of those few companies that can do almost all of it. if not the majority of it, under their own roof. I think Figma adding into that mix is going to be wildly successful for them. I'm excited to see where this goes. I don't know if there are other companies that were kind of looking at it, whether it be Salesforce or even some other DXP platforms. But definitely, I think Adobe is a good home for Figma at the end of the day. I know people will probably have some visceral reactions to that, but there are worse places to be for sure. I'm excited to see what that happens. It's going to be unfortunate probably for Adobe XD as a product. They'll probably do some merging, some purging. It might get sunset, but Adobe's made a number of really good acquisitions. I think the price tag is just indicative to the times. This is a SaaS solution. How it gets baked into Adobe's kind of SaaS environment is going to be really interesting. But I think because it was SaaS, because it was used by a number of probably a lot of companies that are already using Adobe solutions, I think that was one of the big reasons why Adobe purchased. Who did they purchase last? Content Cal. There was like 1,000 kind of users in that world. Maybe it was why they purchased Magento, or was it Marketo? They look at those corporations, they look at their acquisitions from like who's already using it was Workfront. That's who it was. That's right. So when they purchased Workfront a couple years ago, Adobe did a client analysis and said, we have 1,000 plus clients that are also using Workfront. Why not buy Workfront and bake it into our workflow system and fill a gap? Adobe XD wasn't getting the traction. Figma clearly was in the marketplace. There's probably a bunch of clients that are in there, so it probably made a lot of sense from that perspective as well. If I were making an acquisition, I'd be definitely looking at it not from a net growth perspective, but how do I provide more value to my existing customer base by bringing it into my ecosystem? I think probably Figma fit a lot of those check boxes, just like Workfront did. So exciting times there. I mean, obviously this is the announcement to the intent. It's going to have to go through a lot of other regulation and regulatory, kind of purchases, agreements and stuff before it can be finalized. But exciting news from the Figma acquisition at the same time. So 3 topics for today for my Friday. No real kind of listeners or viewers out there. Hey, maybe we'll get you next time. But thank you again for joining my kind of perspective on what's going on in the world of digital marketing, technology, and growth. 3 topics. So Fridays with Fred. We'll be back not next week. Next week, I'm going to be out running a Ragnar in Michigan. So wish me luck on that. And then the following week, might have to skip that one too, because I might be down in a conference down in Austin, Texas. Maybe we'll do something remote and live from there. In any case, you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. If you're on the broadcast of this, if you have some comments and thoughts on this, drop it in. Hit me up on Twitter at According to Fred. I'm also on LinkedIn and other places in social media. You all have a great weekend. Thanks for joining. Talk to you soon.